Let's do intros. And the order that I see is Francis, Rock, Ron, Michael, me. Tell us about you, Francis, and what you're doing, a little of your career, just a bit. And what's your connection to MSSP?
Sure. Hello, everyone. Francis Ofungwu. I am the CEO of DevSecFlow. We are automating all things SecOps, and we are doing that with agents right now, but we believe that the story to hyper automation in the cloud and in security is going to be more than AI. My career has spanned the last 20 years, doing a number of roles between CISO roles and product leader roles, and really being that intersection of cybersecurity and emerging technology. Been doing this now, as I said, for 20 years, seen a lot of different movements and different things that have shaped cybersecurity as it is today. And I have a lot of opinions, and I'm glad that Peter invited me on this format to share them. My relationship with MSSP, so I've been a product leader for MSSP before at Rackspace, where I formed the first MSSP go-to-market plan for our web application firewall and threat management platforms. And in the last 15 years, I've either bought or been at an MSSP and selling their wares. And it's been an interesting last decade, at least, in the MSSP space. I've seen a lot of changes for the better, but not as much as I've seen things go relatively sideways in this market. So happy to share more. And again, thanks for the invite, Peter.
Thank you. How about you, Rock?
Thanks, Peter. Hey, everyone. I'm Rock Lambros. I'm the CEO and founder of RockCyber. I've been in the industry. I've been in tech for 30 years, cybersecurity specifically for about 25. And I've kind of been on all sides of this equation, right? I've led internal security teams. I've built internal security operations centers. I've hired MSSPs. Now I advise MSSPs on strategy and scaling securely. Ugh. And I've also ran a large global NOC SOC for a component of the federal government as a federal contractor. So I consider that actually operating a pretty large MSSP. And so I've kind of felt all sides of the pain, from the alert, burnout, and overload at 2 a.m., all the way up to sitting with the boards, worrying about MSSP costs and are they getting outcomes and are they getting actual ROI out of their MSSPs. So happy to be here and riff, burn, and also uplift MSSP. Uplift. There you go.
Hey there, it's Ron Gula. So I've been in the business for a long time. The first time I really encountered MSSPs when I started a company my wife called Network Security Wizards, which made the Dragon Intrusion Detection System. And RipTech, one of the first major real MSSPs in the late 90s, used it to not only save them money, but be better at detecting. I went on to do Tenable after that. A lot of MSSPs out there, use Nessus and use Security Center to do vulnerability management scanning, that sort of thing. Today, I run Gula Tech Adventures, and we invest in cyber and AI companies. And a lot of those cyber companies deal with MSPs, MDRs, and MSSPs. So we're in Huntress, we're in Inky that was just acquired by Kaseya. We've got positions in like DNS Filter and just a lot of other. We're actually invested in an MSSP called BMO. And part of our investment thesis is all this is that, what problem are you solving, right? If somebody wants to outsource security, that's great. But what's a SaaS? What's a service? What's a product? It's a really fluid time right now. So I'm looking forward to the conversation.
Cool. Hey, everybody. Michael Farnum, CEO of CYBR.SEC.Community. I've been in this business, same as everybody here, a long time, 30 plus years. I started out in IT, network engineering, all of that came up like traditionally, like you used to get into cybersecurity, not an analyst and stuff like that. So the most recent role before I started this one was advisory CISO for Trace3, CTO for Set Solutions, both cybersecurity resellers, integrators. A lot of the work we did, we do have some managed services at Trace3, but mostly who I worked with were the ReliaQuests and the Red Canaries and all of those of the world where we would help customers figure out how they wanted to work with a MSSP, or some people would call them MDR, depending on your categorization of that, what kind of services they would want to consume from them. Do they want to get the whole bucket, all of the different offerings, which could vary from just doing managed SOC stuff to all, running whole machinery and whole programs, like, some of them, to Ron's point, would use Tenable for that. So yeah, I've been doing that for a number of years. Worked at Accuvant with Peter way back in the day, pre-Optiv days, and we would work with what I would consider the old school MSSPs back then that would come in and take over your whole environment and run everything for you. So yeah, glad to be here. Excited for the conversation.
Let's start with that and with definitions, which isn't exactly on the topic list for this episode, but I think we've been playing fast and loose with it. What's old school, what's new school, what's MSSP, what's MDR? I tend to think of MSSP as MDR, like as interchangeable, but I also remember when MSSP was, we manage your firewalls, and I don't know.
My definition tends to break off at, if you stop offering managed services like managed firewall, managed patching, managed VM, any of those core services that generally are operationalized by a team within your environment. If you quit offering that and all you offer is managed alerting, maybe even threat hunting, those kind of things, that's where I see it breaking off into more of an MDR versus an MSSP. That's my definition. Now, I still see it. Multiple customers. I've had a customer not too long ago that came to me and said, we need a MSSP, and I, rookie mistake, went into let's look at the old school definition. I don't think there's very many of those left. There are a few. How many do you? And they're like, we just need somebody to manage our SOC. And I said, well, that's MDR. And they weren't up on the definitions. That was my job to be up on the definitions, and that's how I kind of defined it. We've even seen a modification of MDR from EDR and XDR and all of those. There's a lot that gets rolled up into that, but I tend to focus on the MSSP. In my world, stops when you quit offering all of those deeper managed services. So
a couple other maybe nuances on that. If you say MDR and you compare it to somebody like maybe a company who leverages the great services from CrowdStrike to offer MDR services, that's a little bit different than buying it directly from a company like Huntress and whatnot. But then if you start looking at, well, I'm an MSSP, but I offer incident response, or I'm an MSSP, but I offer consulting to get you ahead of things, it blurs the lines. A lot of these guys are offering different things. I like to think about it as what services are SaaS and what services are human. And, it all gets lumped into the MDR stuff, but they're both very, very different types of technologies and profit margins.
I'm hoping the answer is no. But do the definitions matter outside of like rooms like this? I mean, is this inside baseball? Or does the definition of like MSS, MDR, human XDR, managed security as part of managed IT, does it matter until should we just leave that to the marketing people and the pitches and the quote?
I think the reality is it should matter, but from the customer standpoint, if you look at it from the persona of who's buying these types of services, to Michael's point, it doesn't matter because the landscape is very confusing. I think we've muddied the waters over the last forever into cybersecurity definitions that people have stopped being as smart as we want them to be when they're purchasing these types of services. They just know they have a problem, either compliance, board driven, whatever the drivers are, and they want someone to take that problem away from them. So the whole market definitions of what Gartner creates tomorrow stops losing its meaning because these people just have problems. So to answer your question more specifically, it should matter, but unfortunately it's stopped mattering from the customer perspective.
Yeah, I think we have introduced so much noise into the ecosystem. We've introduced a lot of noise, and so have the research analyst firms with their pick on them all, right? From a magic quadrant to a wave to whatever, around trying to fit these services and solutions into these buckets. And I get it customers probably need some sort of thought model to wrap their minds around, hey, what are the services that I need and what are the companies that I could look for to get these services? But I think at a fundamental layer, the definitions don't matter because you're looking to outsource services. Period. Dot. End of story. Get to your peers, get to whoever to decide who is in that space that offers said services. I don't care if they call it MDR, MXDR, XDR, ADR, all the DRs, SIM as a service. I've seen it all, right? Focus on,
Forgot next gen SOC.
I mean, and then there's the next gen to the next gen, right? And then there's AI enabled next gen ML, right?
Yeah.
And all of it, right? And we've just introduced so much noise. I think part of it is, we've done it to ourselves from a cybersecurity community by allowing the marketing fluff out there.
And the buyers out there, compared to like buying a car, you might not own a Tesla, but you might know that, distance of battery life matters and that sort of thing. The buyers of MSSPs, MDRs, outsourced IT, whatever, they're probably not following this conversation because we've created this, all this complexity of what we can and can't do as an industry.
Yeah, I agree with that. I mean, to my case and point with the customer not knowing which one was which, to Francis and Rock's point, it all just came down to, it was my job to get them what they needed. It was my job to whittle that down and to figure out what services they wanted. In the end, they don't care what's on the marketing sheet, MSSP or MDR or XDR. They just care that the services that they're looking for are available and which one does this the best. And it was my job to help them whittle that down. So yeah, ultimately the definition did not matter. I'm a categorization guy. I'm also, ex-military, like putting those labels on things because to me, it makes it simpler. That's why I actually enjoy buzzwords a lot of times because it helps me categorize things in my head and that's how I organize in my brain. But for the customer, I think to your question, Peter, outside of this little world, it probably doesn't matter as long as they're getting what they need.
As long as it's useful to people who know. I mean, when there's enough chaos and confusion, people, it's like a Zen koan. You just like give up and become open to advice, and hopefully the people giving the advice show up with the right intentions and the right knowledge.
Maybe that was the goal of Gartner the whole time, to cause confusion.
Gartner has a purpose, which it's funny. Like I wish I had invited Bradley because he really wanted to be on this too, but I'm just like, we're gonna have crowd control if we have 6. Because he understands it really well, having lived in Gartner and out. But we're at a moment where like the amount of complexity in technology and business and also terminology is just overflowing thanks to the big A, which we're not going to talk about unless we have to. We actually in a better position with all the confusion and all the complexity in terms of being able to reframe things and get down to like, customer, what do you really need? Instead of let me teach you all of the terms and the frameworks and expect you, customer who just wants to make shoes, to make decision. Like, maybe things are better than they look because they look worse. Or am I just too zen right now?
I mean, I think the biggest thing that's driving a lot of these things is companies requiring to be SOC 2 and the desire for them to be some sort of compliance with CMMC. I think that's been the biggest motivation for IT and small business that I've seen in the last 10, 15 years.
Well, let's talk about the automation topic and new possibilities that come with the sort of surge in adoption or the new adoption of CMMC and people struggling with SOC 2. My sense of automation is if you're not sort of attuned to automation and practice at it from the beginning, you're going to have trouble. You may never do it. But new requirements that could bring new skills, new habits obviously we have things like Vanta. And Vanta has a managed services model. We have one customer on that. But what else? Like how does automation help with, say, CMMC, which, by the way, I'm not up on, be candid.
Well, it's interesting. So with something like CMMC, there's a lot of MSPs out there who, they're doing MSP type work, again, with the definitions, but I'll give a decent example. Our investment in BMO, they actually will manage the Windows deployment. So the Windows licenses, the desktop and things like that. And then they build on their Microsoft services on that. And that's not much different than other MSSPs. Let me see this more because I'm based in around the DC area, where there's some sort of blend of the actual IT management with the actual security monitoring. So then it becomes easy to like hook that into a Vanta, a Drata, doing that sort of thing. I think that's good. We're still seeing people like that get popped, from stuff like the SalesLoft drip Salesforce thing, because it's outside of what we're normally monitoring. But for the most part, that's a program that's going to allow you to repel most intrusions, most ransomware.
I mean, just from the perspective of compliance itself to something automation, I've worked on building. It wasn't actually an MSSP that did it. It was the customer had a large enough environment and enough money to do this themselves, but we built an elastic environment that would monitor certain areas of their environment and certain areas of documentation where they would have to keep documentation up. And we built out the monitoring of those, let's say this particular file and this particular folder with these particular files, and it had these things where you had to maintain certain policy requirements and things like that. And it would give them a dashboard that would show them that they met 8 out of 10 controls or in a certain area of whatever standard that they had to meet. That kind of automation can very much help you from the non-technical, and some of it is technical, but mostly from the non-technical perspective of you having to meet a certain compliance. So if you've got to meet, if you're trying to go do some FedGov work and you need to maintain level 1, I think it is, of CMMC, if that hasn't gone up, and you can automate certain things to make sure that you're putting that in a dashboard for somebody in the government to see it and give them an update or things. Automation there is very helpful.
Yeah, I think even before we talk about the links between automation and compliance, if you look at the current state or the problem state of where we are today, it's more of an economic problem and a scaling problem than it is sort of a compliance or security problem, right? Because I helped a bank build out their SOC a few years ago, a bank out in New York, and they were measuring the fact that the time to value for every new analyst that they hired before they made meaningful contributions was about 6 months. So between the trainings, the onboardings, getting them to know the systems that their SOC was using, the tooling and everything, before they made meaningful contribution, that's 6 months. I know the initial reaction is, wow, that's a long time, but it's actually very impressive that they're actually measuring time to value for a new employee, because most organizations don't. And I feel like we lose a lot of context when we jump to automation projects without knowing what the current state looks like, what the problem state looks like, because we just know automation gets us some level of value, but we don't spend enough time understanding the challenges that the automation will solve. I think that's part of the missing link between the compliance piece and the automation piece is we're not quite 100% sure or know the intent of what automation we're looking for compliance, because just not enough knowledge of our environments to make that determination.
I would even abstract it a layer above that. I think organizations, and I know we're kind of getting away from MSSPs, but I'm saying organizations in general are so anxious to put in automation for automation's sake, whether that is AI, traditional RPA, whatever the case may be, that they're not taking a look at re-engineering their shitty processes, right? And they're just going to make their shitty processes shittier faster. And as opposed to tackling it from an outcome-based perspective, right? Of what is the outcome I'm trying to achieve? What is the measurable, tangible result? What are the gates that I need to meet to get there? How do I re-engineer processes to make that happen? And then I'm going to automate that. I think we're seeing a lot of trying to keep up with the Joneses because, we read all the time and preach it all the time that automate or die. So people are in such a rush to automate things without taking a step back and analyzing their current processes and doing some real legit business process reengineering.
I think we broke Peter.
Yeah, you gave me a lot. Well, the good thing is pauses are good here, and I had there's
he's re-engineering.
Well, I mean, I've only been, I'm a 3-year-old entrepreneur. And I'm learning a lot of things for the first time, having been around. We're also learning. And we like to poo-poo the metrics because they're hard and nobody really wants to fund getting them. But all the automation that I'm thinking about these days is CRM, ATS, and marketing. Like, how do I know that the time and money I'm spending on certain investments in the business matter? And what do I need to invest more in? And at the same time, I've been thinking about the SOC metrics. So we have these calculators that I vibe coded onto our website. And one of them is really funny because it talks about human in the loop metrics and number of actions per time period. And my next thought was, how the hell are you getting that? And what occurred to me was when I took like Business Management 101 and they were talking about time and motion studies, where there's somebody with a clipboard and some poor sweaty dude carrying bags of dirt from and putting them in the hole and walking back. It's like 7 steps. All right, 8 steps that time, shorter step, did we jump to response actions too early? Like, it's kind of like you go to the gym and you think you're going to like deadlift a half a kilo, whatever heavy thing is. What you really should be doing things like treadmill, light weights. Like, did we just go too fast?
In the process automation stuff?
Yeah. Or like, what killed SOAR as a market category? I mean, we now have things like N8N and things that sort of escaped the RDA, RPA space.
The way I see it is like, and this is more large enterprise than MSP, but I think it's relevant. Like, the person who builds the SOAR rules, the person who builds the GRC, the person who builds the business process automation, you're basically founding a church and you're asking everybody outside that organization to come to your religion. If you leave, one of the first things people will do is rebuild that. Like, and we've seen that with new technology, new people. It's a certain way of doing things. And I think that's the human factor that's really driving these people who are either locked into old processes or, trying to jump on the new thing, right away.
What about cargo cult? The people who would say we've always done it that way, but they don't even know that they always did it that way. They just think that's how it's. I mean, one question is like, why do we still have Sims? I love Sims. I grew up in Sims. I'm not
podcast for that.
Probably we're gonna do season 2, and I'm not sure I know what the substitute would be if there is one. But I think everything's up for grabs right now.
I want to go back to Ron's point about why SOAR's failed. What he described, right? Sort of that person that takes the charge or leads the effort to create those rules and heuristics. That was a challenge. That was the bottleneck. That was a choke point to most SOAR failures, is you were hyper dependent on people to write the rules for automation. I think that problem goes away. In fact, we're seeing that problem goes away with the advances we're seeing with agents. Is you don't need humans to write rules for machines. Machines are better at writing rules for machines. And we need to take that toil away from people and have them up level or upskill in things that actually make a difference from an outcome perspective. So I'm including my business in this reference, but everyone's saying that we're now an agentic AI or agentic SIM or agentic SOC. All we're doing is taking the SOAR playbook, which was a useful playbook, one step further by removing the toil required to train those models or write those rules to make the machines talk to the machines better. I think if we're agreed that that's the issue that led to the false positives and the different non-value added work that we saw people doing, then we're going to be in a better place today than we were when SOAR first came out.
Yeah, I agree with that. I mean, it's one of the reasons I liken it to the reason kind of we want to get to automated driving is removing the toil of having to pay attention and to do and all of the lost productivity. I mean, people have gone back to productivity with it sometime by listening to podcasts, that kind of stuff. But essentially, like, you've got to worry about all of these other things. So I'll say, like, this week I traveled I live in Houston. I traveled from here to Dallas. I took Ubers and I took Von Lane bus to get to Dallas so I could work the whole time, and I was very productive. That's the same thing as having an autonomous vehicle. I remember seeing this commercial, I don't remember what it was, and it was kind of silly because the guy was in an autonomous car, he took off and he pulls out a newspaper and is reading it. I'm like, well, you're probably not going to be reading newspaper, you're probably going to be on an iPad, but regardless, the person was able to do some work. So to me, that automation, I don't think it's a quick enough jump, honestly, to get to that point where we can start put people in other roles. Like we see all these people trying to get in. I mentioned earlier about how I got in, and people doing analyst work, that level 1 analyst work. And they're like, oh, anybody who's got some gumption and some drive wants to do something else, right? They want to get past that. Well, this enables that. You kind of, it forces that function. You have to move up and learn something else and not have that toil of going, oh, that might be something, that might not be something. And I don't know if I can trust the sim to give me a good read on that or not, if that's a real indicator. And then now I have to do all of these things. I think we should have done it a lot earlier. SOAR, to y'all's point though, it's like you don't define the functions, or if you do define the functions, everybody wants to do it different. I remember being a network engineer and I had a Cisco Catalyst switch. And I'd come up with all this really cool configuration to do all this stuff. And I left and my buddy's like, hey, Jimmy just rewrote your whole configuration on that Catalyst switch that you spent 3 years getting, I was like, why did you do that? Like, it was perfect. And he's like, well, he wants to do his own thing. So
I still think there's some fundamental problems with alerts that are being generated from applications, right? So on one hand, we have alerts that we might not know what they mean. Error 42 has occurred, right? What does that mean? On the other hand, we have things that happen in some cases that we don't have an alert for. So for example, when you do, you get your OAuth token, for example, right? I mean, there might be a log back at the cloud that you're going into, but you might not be pulling that into your organization. Bruce Potter started another company, in this area focusing on that. But because we have this sort of not really ground truth, and I hate kind of saying, I get a lot of pitches for next gen SIEMs, ground truth and stuff like that. I've always wanted to basically take all of those audit logs, all of those base things, and correlate that against the security policy. And a lot of times with the security policy, you basically have this tree of allows and don't allows, access control lists and whatnot. I've never seen a product that's been able to marry those things up together so that you could write a better policy, or say, this is going on, or at least prove that these things are happening and they're against policy, but they're not going. We don't have the ability to do that. All the AI that's out there, all the startups I've seen, I just really haven't seen that out there. If you could do that, you could automate, and for the point of this podcast, help MSPs make better, because they can understand the business at a much, much, much deeper level than what they can do now.
Yeah. How many MSPs are you aware of that actually have a data scientist on their team? Right? I mean, they're dealing with so much data, and everybody thinks that, we're just going to throw in an agentic AI system based on an LLM and not actually have the machine learning underneath it to actually make sense of all the data that we get, that the LLM is just going to magically and poof, rag, do the right thing, right? And I think that's a huge spot that's missing. Yes, data scientists are super expensive. They will pay for themselves 100 times over. Full disclosure, I'm in a Master's of Data Science program, but I'm in week 5.
So give 3 more weeks before you're qualified.
Not at all.
Yeah.
And I don't want to be a data scientist full time. My impetus is to understand the underpinnings of leveraging AI better. But regardless, I think that's a huge gap, is that we're not focusing on the data that we do have. And to Ron's point as well, we don't always get great data from our apps. We don't. And I mean, have you ever tried to troubleshoot an authentication flow just into your GCP cloud? Like, you would think Google would have all that, or it's expose all that to you on the dashboard. Nope. Right. So
I'll start having faith in agentic SOCs when I'm going through a pitch, they're not showing me the same PowerShell detections and impossible travel detections that they used to show me on SOARs. It's like there is no difference that I'm seeing right now. So I dug into one the other day, and he had no way to show me anything. Now, he was just an SE. He wasn't the product manager, but I was like, give me a product manager on the line that can show me what this thing can really do, not just the same old marketing things that you've been showing me forever, or a phishing email. I tracked this phishing email. Like, you're not doing anything that any correlation engine can't do right now.
Are we ready to stop selling sock in the box and admit that it was just a way of deferring rigorous thinking and engineering? I remember that going back to like
Anything in a
08.
box drives me crazy.
But half of the startups showcased at RSA and Black Hat were AI SOC companies, right? Which is effectively SOC in a box, right? Just somebody else's box. So it's not going away. Or at least the concept and the pitch isn't going away.
Well, I'm talking about the attitude behind it, lack of respect for engineering as a discipline. Not an engineer, by the way. I'm a business hacker. That's all I do. But I see the results of lack of engineering in lots of places. And much of it comes down to like, I'm not going to spend on a data scientist. I'll buy a product that has data sciencey things in it and hope it actually reworks my lousy processes or workflows, which it usually doesn't, unless you have like some kind of champion or go-getter who uses the technology to change the way the business operates. I mean, it's all ultimately, again, going back to the gym metaphor, it's the gym membership you buy on January 2nd that you use for a couple of weeks and you don't use again and you just keep paying.
Well,
when are we going to stop doing that?
I mean,
or is it possible?
I'm listening to, I don't know if y'all listen to the Acquired podcast, but they're going through Alphabet and Google and everything right now and the AI. So, I mean, they're literally paying some of these people. It's not data scientists. They're not. I mean, they're more AI specialists. But I mean, they're paying these people $1 million+ salaries. I mean, it's just absolutely ridiculous. I mean, it's just a matter of economics at some point that if you're going to be able to market anything and push something out, you've got to go with somebody else's model. You've got to go with what somebody else has come up with. I mean, I've got a friend of mine does a lot of tabletop exercise. He automated that using ChatGPT and got a pro license, and it does really good stuff. I mean, really good stuff. So there's value to that. I don't think it's losing the respect for engineering as much as it is like, I can't afford that. So I've got to do what I got to do to have a product.
And to sort of tie a lot of these points together. So going back to Ron's point around getting the telemetry that comes out of applications and marrying that against the policy violations that we're looking for. That exists today in the DevOps SRE world, right? That's what they've been doing for the last 5 years. And security just hasn't done that. So to Peter's point around that engineering mindset, we need to start driving security down that path of thinking about all the telemetry that is available to have that sort of data science-y conversation. Part of the issue to this point is that we've always been penalized for getting more data. So going back to Peter's point around, is the SIEM dead? Well, the SIEM didn't really thrive because you were throttled on ingestion costs and everything that thing was designed for, because the more you sent to it, the more you paid. So we sent less and we knew less. So to tie all these points together, if we're now saying that storage is cheaper, the SIEM stops becoming this monolith of being a storage layer, an ingestion layer, and a querying layer, and we can decouple those things into standalone functions that are more cost effective for us. And we're able to actually get more data and make sense of the information without being penalized for ingestion costs, then we could be in a better place. So I am optimistic and bullish about the future of this SecOps space because of those costs going down. But to your point, Peter, we have to think about this from an engineering standpoint. We have to build that future to take advantage of these lower costs if we're going to get those outcomes we're looking for.
I don't think we have a good way to ingest everything. And when I say everything, I'm not just talking about the logs and the scans and the threat reports. I'm talking about Peter works from home on the weekends and he brings a laptop with him. Now, maybe we can infer that from the logs. But what about this computer is a SOC computer and it's actually on a physically separate network, right? Or these people have background checks for that. Like, so I get pitched so many companies that are like next gen AI risk stuff. And I'm always like, they're like, ask away, ask whatever you want. I'm like, which of my controls can I reduce because they're redundant with other controls, and tell me why. I haven't seen anything that can do that. Theoretically, you should be able to infer that from PCAP, NetFlow, DNS, that sort of stuff. I've just yet to see somebody come up with a schema that can do it in a way that will work for the enterprise. And again, back to the topic of the podcast, MSPs and MSSPs.
Yeah, logs have more and more over time, to me, struck me as a kind of object of fetishization. Like when some of the old vendors would say, we can collect all the logs and know everything. And
I would like just to be the first on the record to say, I do not have a log fetish.
Some of us did. I built ran a project where I built a SIM for ArcSight for a central bank, and the head of the union came to us because they were unionized, and they said, "Are you going to monitor everything we do?" And I said, "Well, until we have cameras and microphones on your computers and logs coming to you from home, and everyone works at the office." No, of course not. Ha ha ha. And now it's like, well, no, we do have cameras and microphones, and people do work from home. But still, even there are limits to that. And now with, some of the productivity nerds like me are like, can I have a life log that does record everything so that I can use it? And of course, that's going to be used for surveillance. It's like, well, if they can monitor me, I want to be able to monitor me. But even then, like, you get into world models, and I don't know if that's desirable, let alone feasible. Let's go back to Francis says something, maybe with one of my favorite words right now, which is DevOps or DevSecOps. And I wonder if the MSSPs and the MDRs are just selling to the wrong party. I mean, the CISOs don't have any, most CISOs don't have any dough. A lot of them can't make a business case, or don't have time, or don't have they won't get the numbers. They can't get the numbers. This is what I see in MSSPs all the time. When I try and explain, are you making money? And they say, well, what do you mean? Like, well, where's your P&L? And they say, well, I've never had it. Oh, okay. Well, what's your cost? Like, this is why one of the reasons I decided to start this series, because people don't have the basics. But maybe it's time to try a completely different buyer. And I'm thinking about when cloud was new back around. I remember when like Qualys showed up, and people were like, you can't do that in the cloud. And we're like, we suck at it. Why not do it there? Right. And then eventually everybody sort of like followed the path paved by them and by Okta. And now it's considered almost absurd to host your own stuff unless you're military or, have a special use case. The DevOps people, I think, got tired of waiting for security to provide security for the cloud. They just did it. And they did well. They did a good job. Should MSSPs be selling to people who are already sort of more automation friendly?
But are the MSSPs automated enough to
Yeah. Well, they've adopted the bad habits of their customers because they hire from their customer.
Maybe they should be hiring the DevOps people from their customers.
Okay, MSSP is not dead. We didn't say that, but it's ailing. Is the MDR MSSP model on its last legs? And we need something completely different.
I think the issue is, look, when you outsource your legal to a certified lawyer or, somebody who's practicing, when you outsource your HR to an HR shop, there's certifications there. Do the same thing for your accounting, your finance, taxes shop. When it comes to IT, whether you're outsourcing security or IT, the level of professionalism that's there is just not consistent. And I think that's the main issue. You can outsource to somebody, they can do a horrible job. You might go out to somebody and they're the ex-best hackers from the NSA or the CIA, and they got you covered 24/7. You really can't tell those two things apart the first day you meet them. So we have this big inconsistency in the quality of everything that's out there.
Well, the poorest quality in terms of skill is the level 1 analyst, and we have a whole lot of them. And does automating that stuff out, the triage and initial phase or two of investigation, create or force the SOC managers of the MSSPs to build their teams differently? I mean, we all know that like the level 1 SOC analyst job has always been the worst job in the world. And it doesn't teach you much. That's the worst part. And so
look, in the early days of Huntress, Their
Yeah.
pitch was, we make the MSP a hero. The last thing you want to do is to send somebody on site or investigate a ticket. That's a waste of time because your ticket throughput goes down, your productivity goes down, all that kind of stuff. So their whole thing was about making the MSP a hero on the worst day of a customer. I've seen a lot of MDRs and MSPs sort of adopt that. But if we said, what is your metric? How many analysts do you have, or, desk to tickets or to incidents and to things like that? Those would be some statistics that would be really, really useful as an industry to kind of decide who's actually good at doing this stuff. Because some MDR that's got one incident a week, because they've done an amazing amount of filtering and a good security hygiene up front, they're going to be like, we do one a week. Whereas the other guys, we have 10 a day. We're great at this, but they didn't really mitigate anything up front. So that's what's going on out there.
Yeah. I think it's a double-edged sword. Like, MSPs absolutely have to automate or die. Like, I think we could all agree on that. That L1 type of work also causes probably the most burnout in the SOC. Outside of CISOs, like those SOC analysts are probably the most burned out people in the industry. Because that's why the MSSPs have such high turnover, right? 70% turnover or something insane. But now, if you automate out that work, what does the new entry level into the industry look like, right? How do you get skills required to be that L2, L3 type of person to understand if the automation is doing what it's supposed to be doing, if it's doing the right thing, if you do have models built underneath it, is it drifting, right? Are the outputs, the quality of the outputs degrading or the outcomes degrading, that sort of thing. So how are we going to educate that generation for that, whatever that new entry level role looks like? And, I think about that a lot. I don't know the answer.
I don't think we do that through an analyst role. I think that's a very poor way to teach somebody how to do cybersecurity. I think we go back, and I know this is getting off topic a little bit, Peter. Sorry, but this is my take on it. I think we go.
Well, it's the next episode, but go ahead.
Okay. And bring me in on that one if you want to. But I think we get people back to the traditional way of going into cyber, which was to learn about the network and learn about all those things. When colleges and universities started building programs where they wanted to teach you how to be an analyst instead of teaching you how to know how a network works and all of those things and what the basics are, you can go from that to I didn't go from a network engineer to an analyst role. I went from a network engineer. I don't even know if the analyst role technically even existed when I went to that in 99, but I went from that to being a pretty good security person because I knew how things work. I knew what made up a packet. I knew all of those things. So I think we've got to get to that more traditional education model of getting them through the system. Then I think to Ron's point, what happens is you get generally a much more professional person because they've been in these environments for years versus just coming out of college and, maybe just quit smoking weed about 2 weeks ago. Nothing against weed. I'm just saying,
They didn't quit smoking weed 2 weeks ago.
They didn't quit. We just started testing for it.
Smelling like weed right there. Just put it that way.
I'll return to office mandates.
Weed, everybody. I'm firmly for the legalization effort in Texas, just for the record.
And I live in Colorado. That's all I got to say about
there
that.
You go. It opened up at Accuvant, Peter. I think you probably remember that.
So I think everybody here is like 25 years or more. We basically did what Michael is saying, right? We learned networking, but then we also saw the introduction of Wi-Fi, the introduction of mobile, the introduction of virtualization, the introduction of containerization, the introduction of SaaSes and stuff like that. The issue now is like the average person would take 6 years to learn that. So they don't. And then when you ask them, what does the network look like? They usually start with Office 365 with a line that goes to Salesforce, right? Another line that goes to Okta, right? And that's their network, right? And they're not wrong because that's how we access it. But yeah, I do think the old ways are better sometimes.
I stopped asking candidates, what is RFC 1918? And it made me really sad to have to do it. Seriously, they don't know. I think part of the problem is we have thrown bodies at the junior SOC roles instead of automating and we need the SOC level SOC run roles to have the first rung on the ladder. But we were really doing was deferring a decision. Well, two decisions. One, are we going to actually do engineering? which requires you to be good at projects, which operations is not good at by definition. And the other is, are we going to take the development of craft seriously? Are we going to hire real talent, not just people who can try hack me and get to like 3%, which is bullshit. What we've done is we've created a magnet that draws resources away, and people who might have talent, mostly don't. Mostly have no business of being in security, never will, and won't be happy. Have we created this like black hole for value that we could have invested in training people who could actually be successful, knowing that there is no one route. That was the thing. We wanted one path. We wanted an easy button for everybody else so we could say, you, go, take that path and you will succeed. And the reality is it's never changed. It's always like, I came in this way and that way. I was a tech writer and you were a network engineer and you ran cable. And then we all sort of found ourselves attracted to cybersecurity. But it was more likely we were going to be successful because of the struggle. But we had the lack of automation means we have all these bodies. Sorry, I have a little energy around it because I interviewed like literally thousands of people, 20% of whom I have to say, I don't know if you belong in this business. I'm sorry.
I think there's a little bit of, and I'm pointing the finger at myself, get off my lawn moment going on, because for decades, like we've kept this industry to our detriment, right? And we've been working really hard to kind of undo a lot of that and welcome people in the industry and provide paths for people to get into the industry. I wonder if we've swung the pendulum too far the other way, and we need to figure out what that new balance is, given this AI-enabled world where, those opportunities that came up because we swung the pendulum so far the other way are effectively going to be automated out. How do we get the new generation jazzed about getting into the industry through leveraging new technology, leveraging AI, whatever the case may be, and amplifying themselves that way? And we all fell into the trap of the ISC squared, 2 million people, cybersecurity shortages, right? Not taking into the account that those weren't actual job postings, just what CISOs wish they had on their teams, right?
Yeah.
So I kind of wonder if this is all a result of us being assholes for so long and saying, you have to, no, you have to take the painful route that we took to get into the industry. And now we've opened the floodgates a little bit too much.
I agree. There's been some gatekeeping. It absolutely has for a long time. At the same time, I place 75% of the blame on the companies that had certifications that enabled you got to get into cyber because you're going to come right out of, because it's all of our coming out of college, all of our dreams, right? You're going to immediately make, in our days, it was probably like, you're going to make $50,000. Okay, you can afford anything. But now it's like, you're going to make 6 figures out of the gate, and you're going to, it was this massive influx of, I still got young guys. I run a user group once a month, and I still got young people that come up to me and go, how do I do this? How do I do this? And my number one answer to them is like, go to meetings and talk to people. Like, you're not, Peter, I feel like we're getting way off topic, and I'm sorry, but it's just, that's not.
So what we edit. It's fine.
Yeah. But you just can't, I don't get like I literally was able to give a young lady in high school a scholarship the other day for getting into cybersecurity through my conference that I run. It was the biggest honor of my life. And I wrote a thing about it on LinkedIn, and she came up and was asking all these questions, like, what do I need to do to get into cyber? How do I need to be successful? I was like, you're doing it right now. She's like, what are you talking about? It's like, you're asking questions. You're curious. I was like, this industry, yes, we gate kept for a long time, but I have never failed to see a young person or even a person trying to get into this industry go to a group and ask a bunch of questions and not get embraced. Like, they're just like, you're curious, I want to teach you. I want to help you do this thing. And that's the number one thing you have to do. And I just don't, the way they've built this is this fast track. Go do this and become an analyst, and then you're going to be able to go up to your next step. And I worked at what essentially was an MSSP MDR, one of the very first ones, Alert Logic. And I saw these kids go into this and get into that SOC. And to y'all's point, they learned, I think you said this, Rock, they learned nothing. Like all they learned is how to look at logs doing this, and they would wonder why they weren't making a move up into something. And they were, yeah, it's like, because that's all you're doing. Like you need the try hack me stuff and all of that. It's like that gets you somewhere, but that's what everybody tells them for advice. It's maddening. So
I think we can take this to the automation thing,
okay.
because
get us back, Peter. Get us back.
I always had a master plan. I just don't look like it. All right.
4D chess over here.
The AlphaGo. We created a user group called calling all Vibe builders. Right. Some of you have been there. More of you should come. It's like an old style Linux user group. I'm nostalgic, but I also remember that you could show up with your tower machine you built from parts with the Pomona computer show. Some of us were there, and our CRT, and walk in and say, "Could somebody please help me make my sound card work?" Or like the time I used to go to Linux user groups on the road, and I was in Ottawa on a gig, and I went to University of Ottawa and to a Linux user group, and this guy showed a tuner things and like TV software, and TV had already gone digital, but he still built it just for the sheer love of it. And that's what we're doing. And apparently, like, I've talked to Peter Holcomb. He goes to local user groups for AI as well. I think there's a possibility to bring in different kinds of thinkers and different kinds of hackers. I love making software. I can't write code. My eyes don't work that well. But we vibe coded a website and made all this other stuff. We bring in security people, and mostly they're building products that aren't security tools. Rock and another guy were the only ones that do security stuff. Everybody built something that was not. And so I wonder if we should concentrate on the automators who are coming through the AI door. So not AI as automation necessarily, but the people. Is anybody doing that?
Well, if they're not, they're going to be, because I think the more we go into the future, the more it's going to be very easy for any company to say to an AI, I need software that does this. And then the AI is going to make it, just like the replicator and Star Trek. Now, is that going to be a better optimized ticketing system with incident response? Is it going to be a full EDR? Hard to say. I don't know that the MSP market people care.
That's where, to go back to the point around where MSSP should pivot, that's where they should pivot, right? Because that whole product security space that has often been not saturated, it's been often left alone by MSSPs. They focus on the office security, the IT security. I don't know any MSSP that I can tell, well, you're now responsible for all the SBOMs for my application development team, or you're now responsible for CI/CD security. They've never really played in that space. So if they're looking for the next wave of growth, as more and more folks start vibe coding applications that they have no idea where the code came from, what dependencies exist, what keys are being written to secure those applications, MSSPs can take on that mandate and become managed product security, because that's where everything is going. Everyone is becoming a vibe builder. Everyone is becoming a developer of applications that are production based. So who's managing the security for that? Certainly not the in-house folks. Certainly not the engineers that are building those tools. Certainly not DevOps or DevSecOps folks we were talking about earlier. So that could be a wide space for MSSPs. Can they provide a managed product security stack to get some visibility into all these things we're going to be putting online in the next 5 to 10 years?
That's an interesting point. If I'm thinking out loud and I put my recovering CISO hat back on, and I'm thinking about what are the core capabilities, the core competencies that I want to keep in-house versus outsource. And even though maybe we don't do it well, is product security one of the things I want to outsource, given the potential liabilities involved? That's interesting. I totally see where you're going with it, and I agree, especially for like smaller shops. AppSec engineers are expensive. Like for smaller shop startups who can't afford an AppSec person, totally makes sense. But I wonder if I'm a buyer, or it's a CISO buyer, the product teams might get it more. Is that a core competency that I want to outsource? That's interesting.
So I've spent the last 3 years essentially traveling the world speaking on this topic, right? Sort of product security as a concept. And I can tell you that no one is doing it well in-house, right? They may have AppSec engineers, but those guys have, or those guys and girls have 2 years of backlogs of stuff that they found through threat models that they haven't fixed. It's just this space where there isn't pressure on the product engineers or the CTOs to do anything in that space till there is a public incident, right? So I don't know if we have the discipline and know-how to really own that role in-house. And if you can outsource that contractually and have somebody else own the operational risk that requires to hire those people that know about this space and sort of own that space, that would be 10x better than what we're doing today in-house. So maybe you should own that risk and keep it as a core competency, but I'm confident in my sample size that no one is doing that to a very high degree today.
From a legal perspective, you're always going to own that risk. You're just going to transfer some of it, right? And I'm not disagreeing with you. I just want to like provide a little bit of pushback because I don't know. I mean, we've got some really good product security teams with regards to identifying the issues, right?
Mhm.
It's the implementation of the issues. So unless you're actually outsourcing development, actual product engineering, whatever, and it also comes down to dollars and cents, right? Like new features almost always get priority in the pipeline. Sorry, I keep like pointing my thumb and the thumb up keeps happening, but it almost always gets priority over tech debt. And frankly, security vulnerabilities are tech debt. We also need a mindset shift there. And are we going to make progress on that or not by outsourcing? I don't know. That's why I'm thinking, I'm like,
Yeah. It's an interesting space. And again, something that Peter said earlier, CISOs struggle with funding right now. That's universal truth. CTOs that are building products that are profit centers typically don't. And if I'm a CISO and I go to the CTO and say, can you give me a head for AppSec or product security? They're going to say no. If I show up as a MSSP and say this is something that we'll now own for the CTO, I think that's a different conversation. It's a thesis, it's a hypothesis I'm working on. So maybe I'm happy to get the pushback to help me flesh it out. But I just think that's a growth space that is not currently being tested.
I think you're
I think
gonna.
so. If I'm going to deliver firewall management, am I also reselling the firewall? You know, when I was at Tenable, I would have these MSSPs come up and say, I want to buy 1 million IP license for Tenable. And what they were doing is selling 100 to this customer, 1,000 to this customer. So I'm kind of losing out, which is why you see some MSPs, use open source. But I think with AI, it almost becomes irrelevant because if the AI of tomorrow can write a scanning, a configuration audit, or a log analysis tool, that kind of thing, if it's doing that, because it's also my level 1 analyst doing the same thing, you might see MSSPs, become these very profitable powerhouses if they adopt these kind of technologies.
I mean, the ones that I'm seeing it are adopting it out of complete necessity because of the cost of the people. What the biggest issue I'm seeing out of some of them, though, is that they're not, or at least one of them, they're not telling their customers that they're doing it. So their customers are expecting certain things and they're getting a response that is substantially different than what they've received in the past. And they start asking questions, and MSSP/MDR is saying, well, we're doing such and such now. And, we've had legal look at it and there's no violation of terms. We're just transferring this from a person to an AI, and that makes it more efficient and makes it better. And the detections are getting better and the yada, 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 yada. And it's upsetting my customers because they don't have expectations of that. They need to know. I would argue that some of the detections are absolutely better. I would probably see the vast majority of them. They're able to cut costs very, very quickly. They're just not telling their customers that they're doing it. So,
Is that just an artisanal urge? Are we dealing with 6 months from now? Is anybody gonna care? Literally 6 months from now, maybe less. Is anybody going to care if there was an AI stage in the production of a document or an alert or a report? Me, I'm like, I don't care. Is it good? If it's good, it's good.
I mean, I do analysis for customers all the time to look at I'll go in and take a NIST CSF summary document or whatever, run through it with them 2 to 4 hours, do a workshop. I'll run those answers through AI, and I'll come up with three more things that I should have noted in that document that I didn't think about. My customers don't care. I'm upfront with them. I'll say, I did all this. This is my expertise. I've been doing this for 30 plus years. However, I missed this thing, and you probably should add this too. And I got that from whatever, engine that is approved, quote unquote. And they don't care. They just know that it gave them good data. I mean, it's fine. But that's a small case in point. I mean, in different things, there could be a problem. I used to do AppSec, worked for Fortify for years. We always tried to work on creating advice for them when we found a flaw in their, or vulnerability in their code. And that was the big promise. That's what, Veracode did. That's what all of them did. They're all doing it with AI now, and it comes out a heck of a lot quicker, and it's generally more accurate than a person doing it or pulling it out of a knowledge base.
What's more important is if you replace AI with the vendor and you said, oh yeah, we analyzed all your alerts with Microsoft. All of a sudden people might react to that, or Palantir, or, pick whatever company you think is the evil bad guy or your biggest fan, and it changes a little bit. And I think that's going to be very, very much more a factor in people's trust when we start doing these things. But yeah, look, they're going to use AI. The question is, who's AI, and are they going to be telling people?
And are they going to use it well? And are they going to be able to adapt? If I can build a working application in a day, that means I could wind up with a different application 3 times this month. Who's going to do the change control? Who's going to make sure that compliance is done? Who's going to make sure that the integrations are done?
There's one other corollary on the AI thing is, if you guys understand IT and know history about the space shuttle had 5 computers, and these weren't LLM, these weren't interpreting signals. They were digital computers. And every now and then one of the computers would be like, no, we should fire the thruster over here. The other 4 would be like, yeah. I'm starting to see companies use an index of AIs to then make sure that the answers they're getting back are comprehensive, and they throw the one bad guy out and that sort of thing. Now, that does increase your cost, but as AI gets cheaper and cheaper and more prevalent, you're probably going to see people cross-referencing multiple AIs at the same time.
Hybrid AI.
Does the difference between security and not security over time become less about skill and knowledge and more about who's supposed to care? If you don't need your own skill, I mean, if you can get everything you need by clever prompting and adaptive tools that do a lot of the thinking for you.
I think the cynic in me is going to say we've been like that for 30 years, right? It's like, it depends on who cares. We've had the tools, we've had the technology, right? Put in levels of security appropriate to your risk tolerance, which nobody can actually articulate, or your risk appetite, which very few companies can actually articulate. But we've had the tools. I mean, the technology is the easy piece, right? It's, do we care? How much do we care? And how much are we willing to invest to get down to the level of which we care? In articulating that business case, has been hard. It's been super hard for technical security people through time immemorial.
If you compare AI to open source, you go back to the open source days. I'm making this open source thing. As you all know, Tenable, we closed source Nessus. But my point is, on the open source stuff, there was a lot of angst in that business model. We closed source Nessus because people were taking Nessus and competing against Tenable. That's rough. And we look at the AI stuff, it's almost 100% give me money and I'll let you use my AI from the cloud. Even though the models are published, there's not a lot of people who are, I guess some people are doing that. It becomes this delivery model where I'm just going to buy a bunch of GPUs and deliver the service and stuff like that. But my point is, all of those people, they're doing some sort of model where you, in exchange for money, get access to my AI. And that makes things a lot simpler and a lot easier to scale.
To bring Ron, I'm going to ask you a question. To bring this back to the kind of the economics part of what this podcast was supposed to be, I haven't seen anybody truly figure out the token-based pricing model well. And I wonder if from an MSSP perspective, I'm leveraging more and more AI. I'm burning tokens on the back end. Do I understand the economics of what I need to charge my clients to be profitable on that? Or am I losing my shirt? I don't know, like from your portfolio, how some of your companies are dealing with that.
So I actually did a video on this, kind of comparing AI to the open source and why when you invest in an AI company, it's a lot like investing in the early cloud companies. Let's say there was a SIM or packet monitoring company that shipped everything at Amazon. That company's COGS, the cost of doing business and stuff like that, eventually tracked their costs in the cloud. And their IP was using calls from Amazon. Well, if your IP is doing calls to OpenAI, you might be a great company. I mean, not you particularly, but people that are pitching us. Now, these might be great companies, but in the end of the day, they're really integrators. They're integrating the AI cost with that. Now, if you're a services business, that might be fine. The only kind of linchpin there is what happens if OpenAI has to change their price 3 times. We're kind of dependent upon that. So that's kind of where we're at as an industry.
Remember when AWS would lower their prices every quarter and then they stopped and now they're going up? Thank goodness we got FinOps before that happened. Before they started going
what I
up.
was going to bring up.
We're going to have FinOps for cloud and FinOps for cloud and FinOps for AI. They're probably going to be the same people. I remember when like Larry Ellison say that IT is going to be like electricity. You plug it into a thing in the wall. I remember it was Earthlink then. It was 96. And we were all like, you're crazy. And then he was super right. And he's still standing, which drives me crazy. But let's take it back to the question of like, how do you make money? Right now, you have fairly static organizations who want to adopt some sort of automation, expecting that their customer is going to pay more. And I, as a customer, when I see you automate, knowing that your costs are going down, I'm like, so my price is going down, right? That's not happening. So does automation even matter when it comes to the perception of value, or is it just a cost-cutting play? We should just keep our mouth shut.
I had this very conversation probably, I think it was last week. It was what happens it was specifically about that MSSP, that MDR that I was talking about earlier. It's like, well, they're using AI now. So all of their people costs are going down. Why is my contract cost not going down? And I was like, because you're willing to pay that. If you're not willing to pay that, then don't pay it. But you got 5 other companies over here that are willing to pay it. Like it or not, it's a capitalistic type of model. Like the market bears what the market bears. So it's just not necessarily going to happen that way. And it's not just defined on the cost going down for that environment. If everybody has got a demand where they can't afford to put in their own SOC and hire their own people or do their own AI model, then it just comes down to the fact that somebody else has got a really good product. And even if their cost is lower, their margins go up. I still need it because I've got to concentrate on my other business, not this.
The prices of services are inelastic. Costs are elastic. Capabilities certainly are. What's the limiting factor? How can people make more money or even a lot more money? Is it people?
MSSPs
is it trading?
or other?
Is it MSSPs? I mean, that's supposed to be my audience. We'll see.
I mean, they are going to make more money.
It's mostly like my 3 friends who watch these, and even they kind of half watch it. They do all that.
I guess to me, and sorry, I don't mean to run up through this conversation, not let anybody else talk, but I mean, to me, it comes down to what we were saying about if they're using somebody else's model or if they're using their own model, like their costs are going to be potentially inelastic if they're using somebody else's model because they're just paying for them to get it. If they're building their own, then their costs are elastic because they can figure out how to use that, build it, and maybe not have as many people that have built that and just have people to maintain it. They're going to make money that way. I think who's the bottom of that ladder, right? Who's the one that's providing those services? That's where the cost savings comes in.
What knob do MSSPs need to turn to make the most of automation today?
I want to let somebody else answer. I'm tired.
It's a tough one because a lot of MSPs are barely cash flow positive. They're barely cash flow positive. And when I talk about, was it 300,000 MSPs across the country? And then you got the MSSPs that are out there. And then you got a lot of confusion because some of these MSSPs were able to raise venture money as if they were SaaS vendors and not services vendors. Some of these guys are resellers and they're not, it's not their own tech. So there's a lot of weird, things going on there. If I was an MSP, I would really focus on what services am I selling and what value add am I doing. Maybe I just want to be a reseller. Like maybe I don't need to be in the SOC business. Maybe you can just be a great person at reselling stuff. I've seen some MSPs do this, especially when they say, wow, all this stuff's going to come at me from the cloud and as a SaaS and whatnot. I don't need to have a SOC. Other people are like, I've figured out how to do SOC. I've got a relationship with, Peter Schawacker, and I've got a relationship with the university. I got a pipeline of people. I'm in the SOC business. Maybe I'm going to soak up SOC stuff for that. So I think the more you can specialize and enjoy what you're doing, the better off you're going to be as an MSSS whatever P.
I think you said the most important word of this whole series, which is joy. We do this because we love it, not necessarily because it's a good idea, but if we enjoy it enough and if we care about it, then we can be successful anyway.
You still have to eat.
Yeah, I mean, but the joy that comes with it, that brings the commitment, can get a lot done and can put money in our pockets.
Yep.
I think the MSS business has been able to keep going because enough people really cared about it. But I don't know.
I think if people had their druthers, they would hire that all in-house. But it is a lot easier to get $1 to outsource and $1 for headcount. I mean, if we break it down fundamentally, that's the whole reason that space came up. The entire space was created, right? Was I cannot hire internally, so I'm going to go find someone to do it for me. And that comes out of a different bucket on a general ledger somewhere that's easier for me to get access to.
Yeah.
Yeah, go ahead.
It's worth going back to revisit Sophos and the acquisition of SecureWorks from last year. If you paid attention to earnings calls from SecureWorks and just their books of the last 3 years of their existence, you saw revenue going like that, and then obviously gross margin sort of compressing. And it took about 3 or 4 significant rounds of layoffs for them to get their margins to a place where they could get acquired, right? So the lessons from that, for me anyway, were they had to demonstrate they could do more with automation. They launched Taegis and they had MDRs and other tools that were software based. So to your question, Peter, whether it's through integration, from Ron's point, whether they're integrating more tools and not worrying about the people intensive side of things, they're more worried about the software side of things. It has to be a combination of selling outcomes and not selling people a per seat license or a per user license model, because that doesn't work anymore. And if the average MSSP is spending 80% of their OpEx on people, that has to change. That has to change for the future, because we've seen that doesn't scale. And if they want to make money, if they want to have that free cash flow that Ron talked about, it has to be engineering. It has to be software based. It has to be a technical foundation that takes away that very expensive level 1 and level 2 toil that we see in most SOCs.
So if I can boil this down, the knob is outcomes. The way you turn that knob is automation. First, people to make the automation happen, right? Is that accurate?
Yeah.
That means we have our close. Nice.
It took a long way to get there.
You guys are here because you're my generation, and I like that.
You just call us old, Peter?
Smart. You just call me old?
You're the
You
smart
just call me
generation.
old. Thanks. Yeah. Yeah, the smart generation. Well, I mean, we have the history.
Look at all this gray hair. Francis is the only one that doesn't have any
I
gray.
know. We
man.
got to do
Francis
something about
looks great.
Francis.
Yeah.
He hasn't been beat up enough.
It's that filter. I've got that young filter on my camera.
So,
Dialing them from Snapchat.
let me see if I can put a tail on this dog. As part of my preparation for this thing, I started writing white papers, and they turned into books, and one of them is on this topic. There's some hallucination in there, pretty sure, but I think it's still pretty interesting. And there are a couple of MSSPs that I talked about. One is the SecureWorks case, another is Arctic Wolf, another is RelyQuest, another is Deepwatch. I think it's sort of slid backwards into a multi-tiered SOC acting like a call center territory. I really want to have like the people who used to be at that company on a show and talk about how their fall from grace happened. Yeah. So there are a lot of topics that came into this that weren't really germane to this show directly, but we have the education thing in episode 4, or the talent part in episode 4, which will include a psychologist who's working on stress and burnout and flow states. a couple other people I don't remember, but it's going to be fun. There are another 7 episodes left, and then we're going to start planning season 2 sometime next month. It's going to be a grab bag. I might do regions. I want to do a LATAM episode.
That'd be good.
We'll probably do verticals because I have some people from healthcare who want to talk about how should MSSPs better serve the healthcare industry. Let's do a CMMC one, right? Total noob on that one. I would love to learn more about it. So thanks for coming today.